So,
This is the last day of the spring, the 31st of May. My name is Vasil Semikhalov at the Media Ukraine Center. Our guest today is Yuri Sobolevsky, the first deputy head of the Kherson Oblast Council. Welcome, sir. We'll be talking about the current developments in your region, the main trends and the situations in the occupied territories. My first question is, as of now, what's happening in the territory of your oblast, the number of shelling, the humanitarian situation? What we are most interested in is not the current situation per se, but what are the trends and tendencies of the past month? Well, unfortunately, the security situation is very complex. You've witnessed a number of shellings. The last 24 hours, we've seen hundreds of shellings. But in general, everything is relative because the number of projectiles that the enemy has used against us over the last 24 hours, 5 people were injured, 4 people were injured in the shellings, and the 5th person, unfortunately, underwent a number of traumas as an effect of the mine. But he had to go the operation, and his limb was amputated. Luckily enough, we haven't heard any injuries over the last couple of hours. As for the tendencies, the general situation is very complex. The enemy, unfortunately, has very strong capabilities of shelling us, and they're using the aerial bombs. And again, these bombs are guided, but a number of those hit the fields where human beings were not injured. But sometimes they do hit the residential areas. For example, we have got a number of people who were injured in those circumstances. As for the humanitarian situation, it is satisfactory, in my opinion, due to the humanitarian aid that the region is receiving and the system of distribution of such a humanitarian aid. Everything seems to be working. We are seeing people who are telling us that don't bring humanitarian aid to our district anymore. We've got enough supplies. However, I believe that we should continue with the humanitarian aid of the region. In the first place, I'm meaning the people who are in need of such a humanitarian aid. We should be aware that the region is a very dire circumstance. There are a lot of people who are in need. The local administration is doing a lot. They have increased a monetary aid to people who are in dire circumstances, and the same goes for the population in general. We are now actively expecting the liberation of the left bank of the Dnieper River in our oblast. We know that the need for the humanitarian aid will grow exponentially. Yet there is no famine at this point in time, but there is a need for health care, and we understand that the Russians, when they will have to leave, as a rule, they leave behind everything that has been ruined and looted. So we will be under the stress of renovating and providing health care in the first place. The health authorities are expecting this, and the members of parliament are working on this project to know what we will need in the left bank of the river after it has been deoccupied. Can we talk about the normalization of the situation that is relatively farther from the front line? What is the humanitarian situation over there? Have you been successful in demining, in triggering the work of industry and agrarian sector. It is safe to say that the agrarian business and the farmers are working. It is clear that there are challenges because a lot of businesses were looted, a lot of them have been mined, and demining is a major project of the authorities. The stakeholders, the military, the national police, the service for emergency, but we have invested a lot of resources into those works. Having said that, the territory that has been mined is a low one. A lot of shells have not exploded yet. What we see is that week after week, we see people who have been victims of the shellings and the shells that have not exploded. Yes, people are in dangerous circumstances now, and people are thankful to our deeds. As for the people returning, the absolute majority of the people that we are in contact with, those who have temporarily left the region, they're willing to come back, and this is a cool thing to hear. People love the Kherson region. They believe in the authorities, but the security environment is something that tells us that we tell people you have to be patient. The territory has not been demined yet, and sometimes we detract and detect hundreds of explosive devices. Let us listen to the questions from the floor. Olga Opanasenko from Ukrinform. I've got two questions. One, the teachers, have they received their payment in full scale? Are there arrears? And secondly, what is your comment on the so-called primaries held by the Russians in the temporarily occupied territories of the Kherson region? Thank you for your question. As for the teachers, this is a very special issue. You know, the educational front line is destined to win. The occupational authorities have invested a lot of effort into making sure that the educational process is going on in the occupied territories according to the Russian curricula. And because the teachers have turned out to be ardent patriots of Ukraine, the Russian authorities have failed. They had to be slowed downing on their efforts. Sometimes in a couple of regions, the teachers have not been paid yet. But the problem is, you know, what is the source of this complexity? You see, after our communities were deoccupied, and after the beginning of the academic school year, a number of teachers has grown dramatically. A number of schools has increased. And the number of students in those schools who have joined the online education programs, so the arrears are there, but it is a problem that we are working on. We see the results now. The Cabinet of Ministers has allocated enough money for our region, and we wanted the authorities and the Cabinet of Ministers to be aware of and to be prioritized at the highest priority. Our teachers, as I see it, are real heroes, and I am sure that all the arrears will be covered, and working together with the Ministry of Education, thanks to the personal involvement of the minister, we will deal with this problem. The members of the Ukrainian parliament from the profile committee of the parliament, they're very active. This problem will be resolved. Partly it has been settled, and we will make sure that all the payments have been paid 100% to our teachers. As for the second issue, this is the theater of absurdity, what the Russian occupiers call the primaries. You saw yourself what was developing. This is a circus, like a referendum that they had previously conducted. What is most important here is that they allowed people with the Ukrainian passports to take part. You see, it's an absurd that testifies to the fact that the number of people who had received Russian passports is minuscule. It forced the occupying authorities to allow people with the Ukrainian passports willing to participate in that fairy play. And another point is that the number participating in that circus was minimal. They were propagating the effort. The families of corroborators, they indeed participated, but the majority of people were trying to be at the distance. Sometimes you know that people were forced and intimidated to participate. The local authority collaborators, perhaps they had some plan imposed on them, and they tried to live up to those plans, and they were threatening Ukrainian citizens, saying that the Russian FSB would be coming, and people would be forced into participating. People are in a very psychologically stressful situation. They have been intimidated. They know that some authorities are likely to come. They will be taken into custody. But in general, not a lot of people participated in this show. My last question would be this. As for the supply of electricity and things like that, what is the plan for the next winter? What the authorities are doing? Do you have a plan? And how is that plan being fulfilled? There is a positive dynamics on this issue. Our specialists and energy specialists, people working with the facilities, are heroes as well. Think of the circumstances under which they are working. Remember that there were facility workers who died in this war while they were repairing the critical infrastructure. Having said that, understaffed in this general environment, they're doing their business. Yes, we do have a plan for a particular settlement, has not been connected to the electricity supply. We are working to renovate the electricity supply to the local communities. The local administrations are doing their best to help the local companies where it is impossible to renew the electricity supply. We provide generators for people to have a possibility to recharge their gadgets and devices. So we are working on this full time. Unfortunately, there are communities and in some districts of the Kherson city where it is practically impossible to renew electricity supply because of the security situation. There are locations that are very near the Dnieper River. You know, the drones are flying overhead, and there are a lot of shellings. They believe that infrastructure is a legitimate military target. When they see people who are providing generators there, these people are being targeted. Thank you very much. We've been talking to the Yuri Sobolevsky, the first deputy head of the Oblast Kherson Council. Next guest will be the press officer of the Emergency Service of Ukraine. We'll be talking about the latest attacks against the Kyiv city and Kyiv region. Stay tuned.